Because when someone truly moves on, they don't need to perform. They don't need to prove anything. They don't need an audience. The fact that your silence unsettles him proves one thing. He wasn't ready for your absence, because deep down, he was still counting on your presence. And in that quiet, he learns what noise he lost. That's the power of silence. There's something deeply unsettling about not having access to someone you once controlled emotionally. It's not always about love. It's often about the control that love used to give. When you go silent, especially after you've been open, expressive, nurturing, and consistent, you shift the entire dynamic. Suddenly, the person who once depended on your reactions, your responses, your vulnerability to feel powerful, is left with nothing but echo. And that silence is suffocating to someone who fed off your emotional availability. You may have walked away thinking you'd beg. You may have withdrawn expecting you to chase. That's how emotional manipulators operate. They build confidence not on connection, but on your reaction. Every text you sent pleading for clarity, every late night call asking for understanding, every tear you shed, he used that as reassurance. Not that he was doing the right thing, but that he still had a hold on you. But then you did the unexpected. You didn't scream. You didn't plead. You didn't block and unblock or send paragraphs he'd never read. You just stopped. You fell silent. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you realized nothing needed to be said anymore. That's when the panic sets in for him, because in silence, he loses access not just to your voice, but to your energy. Your silence becomes the proof that he can no longer reach you, not emotionally, not mentally, and not spiritually. And that's the difference. You didn't take your silence as a weapon, you took it as a boundary, a statement of power, of healing, of emotional independence. And he feels it, not in a way he can always explain, but in a way he can't escape. Because when someone has always relied on your emotional response to feel significant, your silence exposes how insignificant their control really was. It's no longer about what you lost, it's about what you reclaimed, your peace, your power, your emotional privacy. Silence breaks the patterns that manipulation thrives on. And once you step out of the dance, he's left dancing alone, trying to perform for someone who no longer watches. That's when he realizes he wasn't addicted to you. He was addicted to the access he had to you. And now that access is gone. They say silence is golden, but in dark psychology, silence is magnetic. It draws attention not by force, but by absence. When a man pretends to move on, but still holds emotional attachment, your silence becomes a mirror he can't look away from. It reflects everything he's trying to hide, even from himself. You see, emotional attachment isn't always loud. It doesn't always scream, "I miss you," or show up in messages at 2 a.m. Sometimes it shows up in the way he watches your stories but never likes your posts, in how he brings your name up casually in conversations, or suddenly starts following things you once loved, pretending it's coincidence. That's not moving on. That's emotional residue, and silence is what brings it to the surface. No, he may act as if he's fine, laughing louder, posting more, going out with people you've never seen before, but that's not healing. That's performing. That's distraction in disguise. Because deep down, silence forces him to sit with himself. No validation, no feedback, no emotional handouts. And the thing about someone who's emotionally attached but acting detached is they depend on your reactions to feel seen. Your silence removes the spotlight, and without it, he's left to wonder if he ever really mattered. That's where the unraveling begins. The truth is, when someone is still emotionally tethered to you, your silence becomes deafening. It asks questions louder than your words ever could. Why isn't she reaching out? Has she really let go? Did she stop caring? And that discomfort, that unease, that's the exposure. He's not hurt because you're gone. He's broken because you're not trying to return. He's wounded, not by your silence itself, but by what it represents: strength, boundaries, peace, growth. He might try to test the waters, send a meme, like a photo, comment something vague. But those aren't gestures of love. They're feelers for access. And your silence tells him access is denied. It tells him you had a chance to value presence, now you have to deal with absence. And that contrast, that emotional vacuum, it pulls his unresolved feelings to the surface faster than any confrontation ever could. We live in a world that encourages us to react, to respond, to prove our pain through words and anger. But silence is sacred. It's a signal to the emotionally immature that you are no longer playing the game. You've exited the cycle. You've moved from confusion to clarity, from chaos to calm. And for someone still emotionally attached, that is the most painful truth they can face, that your peace no longer includes them. That's when they realize fake moving on is easy, but faking emotional detachment in the face of your silence, that's impossible. Sometimes the loudest message is the one you never send. When someone pretends they've moved on, what they truly fear is not your anger, not your reaction, not even your words. They fear your indifference. Because silence doesn't just cut communication, it cuts control. And control for someone emotionally attached but faking distance is everything. See, when you were emotionally available, your presence gave him power. He knew how to trigger you, how to reel you in with half gestures, how to keep you emotionally occupied even while pretending he didn't care. But silence breaks that illusion. It says you no longer have access to my emotions. And that boundary, that invisible wall, it's more powerful than any speech because it's not about revenge, it's about rebirth. When you go silent, you're not just ignoring him, you're healing yourself. And healing makes you unpredictable. That scares him. Because as long as he could calculate your reactions, he could keep playing the game. But silence says the game is over and you've stopped keeping score. It says you're no longer available for manipulation, for breadcrumbs, for one-sided effort. That's where his emotional discomfort kicks in, because he starts to see you in places he never looked before, in peace, in boundaries, in self-respect. And he starts to ask himself, was she really the problem, or did I just underestimate her strength? That question alone can haunt a man far longer than your presence ever did. In dark psychology, silence is not passive. It's strategic. It forces the other person to do something they're rarely ready for. Sit with their own discomfort. Reflect on their own void. And if he's still emotionally attached, your silence becomes an emotional interrogation. Not because you're asking questions, but because he starts questioning everything. Every smile you shared, every moment you gave, every chance he took for granted. He may replay them, not out of nostalgia, but out of regret. Because now, in the vacuum of silence, he realizes the true cost of losing someone who was real. And that realization doesn't come when you argue, it comes when you disappear. This is the shift. When you no longer try to prove your worth, and instead let your absence speak for itself. Because silence does what words can't. It tells the truth without raising its voice. It exposes his emotional ties without exposing your pain. And the longer the silence continues, the deeper the reflection becomes. He may deny it, he may distract himself, he may even try to mirror your indifference. But behind the mask, behind the posts and the casual check-ins, the emotional pull still exists. You didn't just go silent, you became the reminder of what emotional immaturity lost. But let your silence continue to speak, because if he was only pretending to move on, then your silence will be the one thing he can't pretend doesn't affect him. You see, when someone tries to fake moving on, they often rely on one crucial tool: performance. They'll show you they're happy. They'll post pictures with new people. They'll flood their life with distractions and noise. But what they cannot fake, what they can't outrun, is the quiet craving for your emotional response. That's the difference silence makes. It stops the performance because there's no audience left. When you go silent, you're not giving him applause. You're not validating his new chapter. You're not watching. And that, more than anything, eats at the core of someone who still has emotional ties but refuses to confront them honestly, because deep down, he wants your silence to break. He wants you to say something, anything. Even anger would be proof that you still care. But when all he gets is nothing, it rattles him. It rattles the illusion he built. It shakes the story he's told himself about how replaceable you were. Because silence doesn't just remove your words, it removes your energy. And when a man is emotionally attached but in denial, he feeds off your energy like fuel. Even if it's conflict, even if it's confusion, attention is still a form of access. But when you pull that away completely, he has to deal with what's left, his own emptiness. That's the part no one talks about, the emotional withdrawal. It's real because he didn't expect the silence to last. He thought it was a phase, a game. But you weren't playing. You were healing. You weren't ignoring him. You were finally choosing yourself. In that silence, he begins to notice the absence of something deeper than just conversation. He feels the loss of emotional safety, the presence that used to steady him, the way you made him feel seen, valued, understood. He may not admit it out loud, but his patterns will shift. He'll check your stories. He'll revisit old texts. He'll linger in memories. Why? Because silence exposes the part of him that's still attached. And detachment never leaves quietly. It leaves in echoes. Silence forces him to confront the reality he tried to bury. That connection, like yours, doesn't come around twice. That emotional loyalty can't be replaced with convenience. And when he realizes he can't feel what he felt with you, no matter how many people he surrounds himself with, that's when the truth hits. Silence didn't just end the conversation. It exposed the lie. Because if he had truly moved on, your silence wouldn't matter. But if it does, if it lingers, if it stings, then that's the evidence of unfinished business, of a bond he underestimated, and he'll replay it in his mind over and over, not because he's obsessed with you, but because he's finally seeing what he failed to value in real time. Let the silence do its work. Don't interrupt it, because when someone is truly attached, it's not your presence that haunts them. It's your absence. There's something powerful that happens when a man loses the emotional upper hand. You see, when he thought he had you wrapped around his attention, when he assumed you'd always be the first to reach out, the first to explain, to fix, to beg for closure, that's when he was most careless with your heart. That's when he played games, kept things vague, pulled away, and returned when it suited him. But the moment you stopped playing that role, everything began to shift. Because silence flips the script. Silence removes the power he thought he had over your emotions. When you go quiet, not as a strategy, not as manipulation, but as a reflection of your healing, it confronts him with a truth he never prepared for. He always expected you to speak. He expected your emotion to be loud, your love to be desperate, your loyalty to be immediate. But instead, you gave him space. Not the kind of space he was asking for to explore distractions. No. You gave him the kind of space that reveals something deeper, indifference. And indifference to someone who once held power over you is terrifying. When he reaches out and gets no emotional reward, no softness, no anger, no need for explanation, It makes him question everything he believed about the control he once held. Because emotional control is like currency in relationships, rooted in imbalance. He withdraws affection, you chase. He goes cold, you warm things up. But the day you step away and stop participating, he feels it. Not in his ego, but in his spirit. That's what's hard to fake. That moment when a man realizes your silence isn't about punishing him, it's about protecting your peace. And when peace becomes more valuable to you than clarity from him, that's when he truly starts to panic. Because he's no longer the center of your attention. He's no longer relevant in your emotional world. And that, more than anything, reveals his emotional attachment. Because if he didn't care, your silence wouldn't echo. But it does, loudly. You see, the upper hand shifts when you no longer need to be understood by someone who refused to understand you when he had the chance. It shifts when your silence isn't fueled by pain anymore, but by self-respect. That's what exposes him. Because now he's sitting with the discomfort he used to hand you. It's not that he doesn't want to move on, it's that he can't. Not while he still has to wrestle with the truth that you're no longer accessible emotionally. He can scroll past your pictures, pretend he's busy, talk to someone new, but the part of him that used to rely on your emotional vulnerability, that part feels the loss deeply. So, don't mistake his silence-breaking messages for a change of heart. Sometimes it's just the pain of losing power disguised as missing you. And if you fall for it, the cycle starts again. But if you stay grounded in your growth, if you stay rooted in the silence that reflects your strength, then you'll see clearly you never lost him. He lost a version of you that tolerated emotional imbalance. And that's what human kafi he can't get back. When a man pretends to have moved on, he often believes he can mask everything through distractions, new routines, louder laughter, sudden disappearances from social media, or, on the contrary, a performance of happiness online. But there's one thing he can't fake, the ache that shows up in the quiet moments, the moments when no one is watching, when the distractions run out and he's left alone with his thoughts. And that's when your silence speaks the loudest. Silence doesn't just withhold words, it confronts a man with what he didn't expect to lose. See, in the noise of relationships, arguments, conversations, check-ins, reconciliations, he gets used to the rhythm of your presence. Even if he wasn't fully valuing it, he was depending on it, he was leaning on your energy, even if he was too proud to admit it. But when you go silent, truly silent, not just temporarily quiet, but energetically detached, it disrupts that rhythm. And here's the thing most people overlook. Emotional attachment doesn't always look like affection. Sometimes it looks like frustration, like passive-aggressive texts, like needing to know what you're doing even when he says he's done. It can look like popping up months later just to check in, asking about your family, bringing up shared memories, even trying to start a fight just to get a response. That's not healing. That's a wounded ego searching for proof that he still has a hold on you. And silence is the one thing that denies him that proof. The more he realizes he can't evoke a reaction, the more his own unresolved feelings begin to surface. That's when the emotional attachment is exposed, not through grand romantic gestures or apologies, but through his inability to truly move forward. He may look like he's moved on, but the moment your silence remains consistent, it reveals the truth. He's still stuck in the grip of what he never fully appreciated. This is why it's so important to remain emotionally anchored, because the second you break your silence to entertain his confusion, you give away the power you reclaimed. You see, it's not about playing hard to get. It's about no longer playing at all. Your silence becomes sacred when it's not a weapon, but a boundary. And a boundary, once set in love and clarity, becomes the mirror that forces him to see who he really is without your constant emotional availability. Don't be fooled by his sudden presence after prolonged silence. Often, he isn't returning because he misses you. He's returning because your silence triggered something he can't suppress. And instead of dealing with it, he tries to draw you back in, just enough to soothe his discomfort. But you have a choice. You can be the comfort he leans on, or you can be the clarity that reminds him what happens when you stop accepting inconsistency. The silence wasn't to hurt him, it was to heal you. And in that healing, the truth came out, not just about him, but about you. Because now he sees what you look like when you choose yourself. And that's what truly breaks him. You know, there's something powerful about the moment you stop arguing, stop explaining, and stop justifying your worth to someone who never truly saw it. That silence, it doesn't just echo in their life. It haunts them. Because in that stillness, something they never expected begins to surface. Guilt. Not the type they can easily shake off, but the kind that sneaks up when they least expect it. When they're lying in bed at night, when they scroll past a memory on their phone, when someone else says your name. That's the moment the guilt creeps in, and it's louder than any words you could have ever said. See, guilt isn't always immediate. When someone walks away or emotionally checks out, they often convince themselves they were justified. They create a version of the story where they're the victim or where they had no other choice. But silence doesn't support that story. It interrupts it. Because when you say nothing at all, they don't get to argue with you. They don't get to convince you or themselves that you were the problem. There's no pushback, no drama to blame, no reaction to manipulate. And that's when their narrative begins to crumble. First, they may interpret your silence as weakness, like you're avoiding confrontation or still hurting. But over time, when you don't return, don't chase, don't try to fix things, they start to realize your silence wasn't a wound, it was a wall. Not a wall of bitterness, but one of self-respect. And that's when the guilt begins to show its face. They start to remember the things you tolerated, the sacrifices you made, the times you forgave when you had every right to walk away. And now you've walked away and you haven't looked back. That's when it hits them. They had someone who saw them, someone who cared deeply, and they mishandled that gift. They mistook your softness for weakness, your patience for permission, your silence for submission. But now that you're gone and quiet, they finally see the truth. You weren't weak, you were done. And here's what most people won't tell you. When guilt sets in, it's not just emotional, it becomes physical. It drains them. It eats at their energy. They find themselves exhausted by their own thoughts, replaying scenarios, rewriting endings, wondering if it's too late. That's the power of your silence. It's not revenge. It's reflection. It's the mirror they can't escape. But let me tell you this. You didn't go silent to punish them. You went silent to protect yourself. And in that silence, the truth spoke louder than your words ever could. You taught them what presence really meant by taking yours away. And you taught them what peace feels like by finding your own. So if they're feeling guilty now, let them sit with it. That guilt isn't yours to carry anymore. You've already carried the weight of their indecision, their confusion, and their inability to show up fully. You've done your part. Your silence now is not just strength, it's closure. And sometimes the most healing thing you can do is say absolutely nothing at all. There's something deeply revealing in the moments of silence after someone has wronged you, when you've decided to step back, to give yourself the space to heal and grow. At first, the absence of your voice, your presence, might seem like a void. It's not loud, but it's powerful. That silence, it speaks volumes. It's more potent than any words you could say, more definitive than any confrontation you could have had. It's a moment of clarity, not just for you, but for them as well. See, when you stop reacting, when you stop answering their calls, when you stop chasing them, something shifts, not just inside you, but inside them. Initially, they may feel relieved. They may think it's a victory. Finally, they've broken free of the tension, the expectations, the emotional connection you had. But this relief is fleeting. What they don't realize is that silence is a reflection of your boundaries. It's you taking control of your emotions, your time, your worth. And when you stop giving them access to your energy, when you stop allowing their actions to affect you, that's when they start feeling something that they didn't expect, a loss. The weight of your absence becomes more apparent with time. The emptiness they feel starts to settle in. And it's not just about missing your presence. It's about the realization that they didn't value you when they had the chance. You see, when someone takes you for granted, they often think they'll always have you around, that they can always come back and you'll be there waiting, ready to forgive, ready to accept. But silence, in its purest form, doesn't allow for that false sense of security. It shows them that you're not disposable, that you have the power to walk away and never look back. They begin to notice the things they overlooked while you were there, the small gestures, the care you gave, the times you put their needs before your own. They realize how much they took from you without ever giving back, how much they expected without offering anything in return. The absence of your voice is the loudest lesson they'll ever learn. But the thing about silence is that it's not just about teaching them a lesson. It's about teaching yourself the value of your own worth. You've been so used to fighting for others, so used to putting your emotions aside to accommodate someone else's, that you forgot how to fight for your own peace. And that silence, that absence, is your reclamation. It's you saying, I deserve better. It's you telling yourself that you're not going to allow anyone to treat you like an option anymore. You're not going to allow someone to keep you in the background, always there when it's convenient for them, always available when it serves their purpose. This space of silence, you rediscover your own power. It's a quiet power, but it's the kind that builds resilience and self-respect. It's not about revenge. It's not about punishing them for what they've done. It's about healing yourself, finding your peace, and moving forward with the knowledge that you are enough on your own. As they sit with the weight of your absence, they begin to question themselves. They start to wonder if they've made a mistake. And while they're trying to come to terms with their own guilt and regret, you're here, living your life, growing stronger and letting go. You're no longer waiting for them to recognize your worth because you've already recognized it for yourself. Here's the truth. When someone starts to feel the loss of your presence, when they feel that space you've left behind, it's not your job to fill it. They've got to face what they've done and learn from it. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them an explanation. Your silence is the final word, is the closure you need. And it's the only answer you need to give. It's not just about moving on. It's about moving forward with clarity, with dignity, and with a deep understanding that you are worthy of so much more than what they gave you. So when they come back trying to make amends or re-enter your life, don't let the silence fade. Let it speak for you. Don't rush to fill that space with words, with explanations, with excuses. Let them feel the weight of what they lost. Let them understand that you're not a safety net to fall back on when everything else falls apart. You are not a fallback plan, and you are not here to be their emotional rebound. When they come back, let them face the consequences of their actions. And when you choose to let them back in, it should be because they've truly changed, not because they've realized they can't do without you. Silence, when used properly, is not just about distance. It's a statement of self-respect, self-love, and self-worth. And in that silence, everything that needs to be understood will be understood. When someone's silence is broken and they come back into your life after a period of emotional distance, there's something profoundly telling in the way they approach you. It's not just about what they say, but it's about the energy they bring, the way they behave, and how they try to reconnect. You see, when someone is emotionally attached, their actions often speak louder than any words they can offer. They might try to act like they've moved on, like everything is fine, but deep down, the way they reach out to you, the way they show up in your life, tells you the real truth. They might attempt to present themselves as indifferent, as though they've completely let go, but the truth is their behavior gives them away. When someone is emotionally attached to you, even if they have tried to move on, there's an undeniable connection that doesn't just disappear overnight. That silence you experienced, it wasn't just about them distancing themselves from you, it was also about them confronting their own emotions, about them grappling with what they really felt, what they had lost. And when they come back, trying to act like they've healed, like they've gotten over you, it's often an attempt to regain control over something they feel slipping through their fingers. Their emotional attachment is still there, whether they acknowledge it or not. They may have tried to move forward, but the bond between you is not something that can be easily erased. It takes more than time for someone to truly move on from an emotional connection. Time might make things less raw, but it doesn't always heal everything. The way they reach out, their timing, and their words can all reveal the truth. They are not as detached as they want you to believe. You'll notice that their efforts to reconnect with you are often driven by a need for validation. They want to know that they still have a place in your life. They want to see if you've moved on, if you still care, if you'll accept them back into your space. Their actions will be telling. They'll try to reignite the old spark, rekindle the connection you once had. But it's important to realize that this isn't just about rekindling a relationship. It's about them testing their hold on you, seeing if they can still affect you the way they once did. And that's where you have to be careful. You cannot let their emotional attachment determine your worth or the course of your life. When someone reaches out after a period of silence, they're not just testing the waters. They're often looking for reassurance, for comfort, for the sense of security that came with knowing you were always there for them. They want to know that they haven't lost the emotional bond they once had with you, and that despite the distance, despite the silence, they still matter to you. This need for validation isn't always malicious, but it's important for you to understand that their return is not always about seeking a genuine, healthy reconnection. Sometimes it's about them trying to reaffirm their own emotional stability, trying to patch up the wounds that they've inflicted on themselves by pushing you away in the first place.